All right, welcome into take two of the 573 report. After, a couple issues here and there, we think we've got everything figured out. Mitchell Forde is on one side of your screen. I'm Gabe DeArmond. I should be on the other side of your screen, hopefully. See a few of you here understand with the time change, the schedule change, and let's be honest, maybe a couple other things going on in everybody's life right now. We might have a little reduced viewership, but hopefully you guys are here. Hit the like button, comments, questions, all that throughout the show for us, and we'll hang around here for, we generally go a little over an hour. If it takes longer than that, great. If it's not quite that long, that's okay too. We'll let you guys get back to whatever you're doing. Mitch, what's up, man?
Not much. Hopefully you and everyone else can hear me tonight. So
yeah,
that's the goal.
I can hear you. I could actually hear you really loud there for a second. So I think I fixed that. Okay. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. What would this show be without a minor audio issue at the beginning on my end? This is the 573 report. We're brought to you by 573 Tees. You can go online, 573tees.com. They are an online-only outfit. Go through the link in the story on our website at Power Mizzou, and you can get a 10% discount off your first purchase. They got a lot of good stuff. They hooked me up with some stuff last week. Actually, my favorite shirt that they gave me has already been appropriated by my wife, so that's how you know it's good. When the stuff gets stolen by your significant other, they give you good stuff. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time relitigating a game and a fight that was 5 days ago. At this point, we will talk a little bit and take your questions about Florida and all that. And really anything else you guys want to talk about. The SEC basketball schedule is supposedly coming out tomorrow. There's a bye week. There's some injuries. There's Georgia coming up next week, all that. But we will start just briefly because we had a chance to talk to Eli Drinkwitz today. I asked him, didn't really anticipate much of a response and didn't get much of a response, but asked him kind of his impressions after having a chance to look at the fight and the SEC reaction to that. So, Mitch, disappointed neither one of us managed to wear a Darth Vader costume for this show, but just kind of your impressions of the fallout and now Missouri obviously being without players.
We missed our chance on the Darth Vader costume. We clearly should have been wearing that for that live stream of the watch-along of the game on Saturday on Halloween. Clearly, we were just behind the times there. It was interesting. You asked Drinkwitz about the fight, and he gave the very, cliche coach answer. Well, we put out a statement the other day, so you can refer to that.
It was a very revealing statement, too.
But then he actually took a little jab at Mullen much later on in the press conference, kind of for no reason. He wasn't asked about the fight at all. He was asked, I think, what he's learned about himself in the past year. And he said, well, I've learned I can keep my calm in certain situations. And just to be sure we knew he was talking about Florida, he went ahead and said, but also I can go ahead and get my emotions involved if I'm upset if we don't get it on 4th and 1. So
and they don't call offsides.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, they don't call offsides. So that was that was interesting. But yeah, I mean, the game, we talked about it a little bit last night, and it wasn't a great performance. I mean, Missouri was never, they were the less talented team coming in. Their chances of winning was largely based off of Florida not playing well, coming off of, having no practice for 2 weeks and having some guys out, and Missouri playing really well. And kind of the opposite of those two things happened. And so, yeah, here we are.
Yeah, and look, I don't really have much time for really caring about how much Dan Mullen got fined. He makes $6.1 million a year. They were not going to fine him an amount that made a difference to him. Now, I thought $25,000 was a little light, but I don't really care that much, and I don't really see why Missouri fans care. The more important issue for Missouri is suspensions, and they've got 3 guys suspended for the first half of the Georgia game. Chad Bailey is not a guy that's probably going to make a major impact, obviously, defensively. Markel Utze, I mean, I guess he got his money's worth, man. That's really, when you look at it, only 3 minutes of game action per punch. So that's not that bad, but he was the only scholarship defensive tackle that suited up against LSU. Drinkwitz said today they don't expect Kobe Whiteside back for Georgia. So, I mean, fortunately, Georgia doesn't have good running backs and doesn't like to run the ball. So I don't think the middle of the defensive line will be a big issue. But Markel Utze being out for the first half of that game it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, it's kind of unlike it. On one hand, you're right. Markel Utze did get his money's worth, and like at a brawl like that, you only have 3 players suspended for half. I guess 4 if you count Trey Williams. Not terrible. It could have been worse, I think. But 2 of the players come at really bad positions. Markel Utze was playing nose tackle because Kobe Whiteside has been out, and now I don't know who you turn to there. I mean, maybe Darius Robinson comes back and can play there. Maybe you can slide Akil Byers over, but you're really thin there. And then Dylan Spencer was starting in place of Xavier Delgado at left guard. But Eli Drinkwitz told us today Xavier Delgado underwent a tightrope procedure. It's a surgical procedure for a sprained ankle today, and he is not going to be available against Georgia. So you're looking at basically Drinkwitz said it's going to be an open competition who plays left guard against maybe the best defensive line in the country.
Yeah, and I don't really know. Drinkwitz was asked, do you have some guys you're looking at there? And, I mean, obviously, yes, he has guys. And he said, yeah, we have guys. I don't know who. Javon Foster is playing for Larry Borum, and I believe that Drinkwitz said Borum's not going to be back for Georgia, right?
Correct.
So you've got Case Cook at one guard. I mean, the other guard, I don't know, I guess Drake Heismeyer gets thrown out there. Maybe. I don't know how much he's
Mike
Ruth
Ruth is listed there on the depth chart, but they actually suited him up at tight end, I believe, last game because they were worried about not having an extra blocking tight end. So, I mean, that can't bode great for his team. Now, maybe it comes down. I would assume it's him, Drake Heismeyer, or Jack Buford. That's pretty much all they have left to play guard. So, yeah, I mean, either way, you're talking about a guy who basically has never played a meaningful snap.
Right. Either a true freshman, a guy who at one point wasn't going to play this season, or a guy who really hasn't played. But I guess there's 2 ways to look at it. One, again, it couldn't really come against a worse team. Or the other way is, I don't know, you're probably getting beat. I mean, it's not like Xavier Delgado is the difference between beating Georgia and not beating Georgia. So, hey, you take your lumps, you hope to keep everybody healthy, and then I guess you move on to the 4 games that matter. And I want to go ahead and start adding some questions and comments here and encourage you guys to go ahead and, whatever's on your mind. This is a bye week. It's kind of weird. It's a slow time, obviously. So whatever's on your mind, we'll definitely talk about. And so we'll jump around a little bit to different subjects. But Jake wants to know, looks like Mizzou and Illinois are still trying to play the bragging rights game. And do you think that's going to happen? And I don't know, is there – I mean – I haven't seen any information that they're not going to play it, but I also haven't seen any confirmation that they are going to play it. So I don't know, Mitch, is there some sort of new information here that I'm, is somebody written or tweeted about this game that I haven't seen?
Not that I know of. I mean, I believe the 2 schools have still been talking about it from what I understand. Like, it's not like it's just, I think both schools would like it to happen. Let me put it that way. Like, the Mizzou Kansas thing, as soon as it was apparent that wasn't going to be full capacity, I think Kansas was like, well, no, we don't want that to be one of our home games, which are, the game that counts for our home game at the Sprint Center, which I know Missouri fans aren't going to like that, but like that makes sense to me.
It's smart.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, it seems like the 2 teams, like I said, they haven't canceled it. It seems like they would like to make it happen, but I think just logistically, it depends where else everything falls, priority wise. And yeah, I don't know. I still feel like it's kind of 50-50 at this point, maybe 60-40 to not happening just because nothing else is happening in the non-conference scheduling. And it's kind of a mess.
Right. There's a lot of things. What is the non-conference game situation? What is the Big Ten situation? What's the SEC situation? What's St. Louis's situation? Does it make sense to play that game in St. Louis in front of a 20% capacity crowd? Because everybody has to travel to it. I'm talking about both teams, administrators. You got to staff the game, officials, all that. So there's a lot that goes into that. And at some point, kind of like Kansas decided in Kansas City, maybe the juice isn't worth the squeeze as far as what that is. You do that game in large part to make money, and if it's actually going to cost you money, I'm not sure that's something you do.
Yeah, I actually do think I should have said this earlier. I think if it, and this is just my hunch, I haven't been told this, but if it's going to be played, I would not be surprised if it has to be at one of the two campus sites, which would be fun.
But then you have to move next year's.
Right,
and then you get into
a future matchup. I don't know what. One of the future years.
Then you get into which school's going to volunteer to do it this year when nobody can go.
Right.
In exchange, I mean, maybe you work out something where, okay, look, we'll host this year in front of 18% crowd or whatever, and you can host in 3 years in front of a full crowd, but we get enough money to make ourselves whole out of that. But again, then you're putting yourself in a situation where, hey, maybe your team 3 years down the road is like a bubble team, and going on the road and making it harder. These are all things that come into it, and I don't know,
True.
but that's kind of a good jumping off place as far as I think it was John Rothstein tweeted earlier today that the SEC is expected to announce its conference schedule tomorrow, and I mean, plenty of time. We're 18 days from the start of the season, so why does anybody need any more warning than that? I don't really have any idea what to expect. I mean, I thought at one point when they were talking about potentially no non-conference games, I thought it actually would be pretty cool for the SEC to go, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a 13-week schedule, and everybody's going to play a round robin. So, like, Missouri and Arkansas are going to play back-to-back games in Columbia on Friday and Saturday. And then the next Friday and Saturday, Missouri and Tennessee are going to play back-to-back games in Knoxville or something. You just play 2 games every week against the same opponent and all that. I mean, I don't think it's sounding like they're trying to get in more conference games or more non-conference games, which means we're not going to see 26 conference games. But I wouldn't have hated a conference-only basketball schedule. I think you could have made it work.
Yeah, or even just the playing every team twice deal. Like even if you have a few non-conference games, would have been kind of fun. I mean, my guess is because we haven't heard differently, it's still going to be an 18-game conference schedule. That is, I mean, I feel like we would have heard if they were going to, if that was on the table was making it a larger conference schedule. So that's my guess is it'll be relatively normal. And I think I do think I remember vaguely, I get mixed up with the basketball and football scheduling talk, but I feel like I heard somewhere, someone say the SEC had kind of come up with a plan for basketball to start. I think conference games are starting sooner than in the past, so that each team has like a couple more off weeks or a couple more games with only weeks with one game on the schedule, so that they have a little more flexibility, sort of like the SEC has done with football this season, where they have a bye built in during the season and at the end of the season, which obviously seems smart. So
I mean, the Big Ten is proving you do not need bye weeks. Bye weeks overrated.
Yeah, that's Big Ten's just trying to get like a 4-0 team in the playoff.
100%. It's going to be amazing when Ohio State is in the playoffs with wins over Penn State, Rutgers, Illinois, and Nebraska. It's going to be phenomenal. But here's the problem with basketball, right? And we've got a couple more questions coming in, and I promise, guys, we're going to get to them. But keep them coming in, and we'll catch up with you. We definitely see them all. Mitchell Bennett, Matt Anderson, appreciate the questions, and we'll get there. But so here's the issue with basketball. There is a lot of travel involved with basketball, and that's always been one of the problems. I mean, you are flying out on, Tuesday to spend the night somewhere, play a game Wednesday, flying back Wednesday night, flying back out Friday. There have been situations in basketball where teams don't come back home because it doesn't make sense because there's so much travel. So do you think, certainly the schedule is going to be, I think, put together to minimize travel, but do you think we're going to get an 18-game schedule with like 9 home games and 9 road games in traditional sites, or are we going to see something where it's like, hey, okay, you're going to play Tennessee Tuesday night, and then you're going to hit Vanderbilt on Wednesday night, and then you can come back home? Or are we going to see, not necessarily neutral site locations, but maybe even like 4-team little pods somewhere where like Texas A&M, Arkansas, Missouri, and Vandy are all in Columbia, and Texas A&M plays Missouri on Friday night, and Arkansas plays Vandy, and then the next day you switch it up? I don't know how it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense to me. But I just feel like we would have heard about it by now, like on the eve of the schedule, since that hasn't been brought to our attention. Like, I would be surprised if all of a sudden that got dropped on us. Like, yeah, so they're switching up, yeah, how they do the schedule where you play games in clumps with more times in between or something like that. Like, but I understand your point. That would make a lot of sense. And I don't know that, like, I mean, maybe just for simplicity's sake and because everyone's been so preoccupied with football, let's face it, it's the SEC, they go to a normal schedule and just build in a couple extra, half weeks off for teams. But like, I do think that is kind of setting yourself up to fail because, first of all, if you have three basketball players, out like that you're starting to get problematic. You're starting to get into that, a third of the team, a fifth of the team, something like that. And if you're out for 2 weeks, that can be 4 games. So, you're using up the those weeks you build in so fast.
And I just can't see a scenario where, look, we've had 6 months to think about this and try to figure it out. And obviously we've struggled to do so. And it's November 7th before the schedule's coming out. And then we just come out with kind of a normal schedule. I can't, I mean, that to me would be like, well, what the hell have you been doing for the last 6 months? If you're just going to have a normal schedule, just stick with it in June. I just can't see a situation where it comes out and we just look at it and go, okay, yeah, Arkansas on Tuesday and then South Carolina on Saturday and then hit the road for A&M. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. And I'm guessing here because I'm kind of like you were talking about, Mitch. I've been so preoccupied with football and is football going to happen and making all this happen and everything like that I haven't really asked a ton of people about what's going to happen with the basketball schedule. So, partly, certainly that's on me, but I just haven't heard anything, and I'm interested to see. So, like I said, we've got a few more basketball questions, and we're going to get to those, but we're jumping around a little bit. I'm trying to hit you guys in the order that you've gotten on here and all that. And Mitchell Bennett asks, I feel the teams that drop passes don't fix the drops. What are your thoughts on that observation? I'll let you hit this one first because I have some thoughts on it too.
Yeah, well, first of all, I actually asked Eli Drinkwitz about the drops in his press conference today, just kind of about the fact that you kind of tend to see them in bunches. And he said that's indicative of a lack of focus, which, I think is the commonly accepted issue when it comes to dropping the ball, because everyone who's gotten to this level pretty much shows that they can catch. But yeah, so, he says, you maybe they came out flat or unfocused. They're on the road for 2 of these games where they've had drop issues, and after you have one, then you start overthinking it basically, and that impacts. I think he said impacts your psyche. So that's a common issue, and I do think there's a case to be made, like Mitchell brings up. The more a team starts to drop the ball, the more then they're thinking about it. If they know they're getting pulled off the field or something like that, they're probably overthinking or second guessing themselves. So it's kind of a fine line, I think, between you don't want to play a player who struggled with drops. Like, you want to emphasize the importance, but actually Drinkwitz said in his press conference today, we maybe need to do a little bit better job of letting guys get established at the wide receiver position and not subbing quite as often.
Yeah, drops are definitely they're contagious. They're like when you played baseball and you made an error. Like, I don't know about you, I immediately started thinking, oh God, please don't hit me the ball again. Yeah. And then they did, and then you'd make another one, and it just kind of piled up. Drops are the same way, and I kind of go back and forth. Like, I don't know if you can teach a guy to have better hands, right? But by the same token, like you said, everybody that's here made enough plays that they are capable of catching the football. I don't feel like it's like with a quarterback. I've always thought you can't really teach accuracy. You either throw the ball where you're trying to throw the ball or you don't. And I don't know through repetition if you can manage to improve that. But drops, I mean, you do it over and over and over and over. And I don't know if fixable is the right thing, but they need to make sure, like you said, they don't come in bunches. And I think we've hit the point where, yeah, you want to put guys out there, but also, I mean, that, and not to pick on one guy, but in that Florida game, I mean, Damon Hazelton really hurt them early. It took the offense completely out of rhythm, cost them a couple first downs, and, Drinkwitz was asked about Hazelton today, and he really just kind of danced around and said, I don't want to single out one guy. Everybody was bad. Dame's got 5 games left, and we all want to get better. which is a really nice way of saying, yeah, it's a problem, and we're looking at it.
Yeah, first of all, you're absolutely right. I mean, the Hazleton drops killed. I mean, that was big. First play of the game. That kind of sets a bad tone. But yeah, and that's why he didn't play, I think, hardly at all in the second half. That's why Towski Dove ended up logging 40 snaps. He was playing the vast majority of those snaps in the second half. And I think it's kind of no secret at this point that, maybe the Damon Hazleton, I don't want to say experiment, but his 1 year hasn't maybe gone as smoothly as everyone would have hoped. I mean, he hardly practiced at all during camp. They never actually announced that he had earned a number. He just kind of showed up and got one on the first game, which I was hoping with the guys who hadn't earned a number would just be numberless in the first game.
Like
but I think that's illegal.
You have to have a number, right?
You do, yeah, okay. You do. And then he got listed third string on the depth chart. That
acted shocked when I asked him about it.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it's like there's clearly been a little bit of I don't know. I don't want to overcharacterize because we don't know, but it's not all been sunshine and rainbows with him so far.
Yeah. And really with Keke Chisholm too. And look, People noticed it when he said after the first game, I can't throw the ball to myself, and they can downplay it all they want. I think that was a big deal. And we haven't really seen him heavily targeted. I mean, I think there was something to that. But, people are throwing Hazleton in with Jaylen Knox. And, look, Jaylen Knox yes, he dropped a pass last week, and it was a painful one. And he has dropped a few passes this year. But he is offsetting some of that by he's the only guy out there making big plays, right? Consistently. I mean, so I think a guy who, it's kind of like, the guy who goes for 40 every night, and he doesn't go for 40 every night, but the guy who's capable of going for 40, you can live with it if he has 8 turnovers one night. Because he might get you 40 the next night. I mean, Jaylen Knox he had a 32-yard run against Florida that was really Missouri's only good offensive play. He made plays against LSU. He made plays against Kentucky. There's a little longer leash for him than there is for some of these other guys, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's earned a little bit more trust. He actually, you mentioned that 32-yard run. That was, I think, Missouri's only play over 20 yards, and he's been, he's been able to make big plays. He's been reliable. He was, the guy they turned to every time, almost on fourth down against Kentucky. I will say, like, Hazleton has done a good job of getting open because, and that is certainly part of the job as a receiver. Like, it's maybe not a coincidence that we looked at the snap counts on Monday or Sunday morning and said, wow, Towski Dove played 40 snaps. I didn't notice him. Like, right. I mean, clearly maybe he doesn't do as good of a job of getting open, but at a certain point that doesn't matter if you can't catch the ball. So it is a little bit of a balancing act there.
And the last thing, and we're going to get to Jackson's question, which is kind of related to what we've been talking about here in a minute, but the other thing is, I mean, who are we arguing has to play more, right? Yeah, Towski Dove played more. I can see more snaps for Barrett Bannister. He generally catches the ball, but he doesn't exactly play Hazleton's position. To do that, you've got to move Knox outside and put Bannister in the slot. I can see the argument for Boo Smith, who only played, I think, 6 snaps against Florida, because he did make plays against LSU. But outside of that, I mean, Dominic Jacinto's got a bigger drop rate than anybody on the team. I guess it kind of tells us, look, J.J. Hester and Jay Macklin clearly aren't ready in the eyes of the coaching staff. So I guess there aren't a lot of options. And Jackson McNeil says, is the ACC just a weak conference? Has Hazleton underperformed? This certainly doesn't look like an all-ACC receiver. So, first of all, yes, I don't think Hazleton probably ever had a 5-week stretch where he went through something like Alabama, Tennessee, LSU, Kentucky, Florida, right? The ACC doesn't have that to offer unless, I don't know, maybe Virginia Tech got screwed on the schedule one time and played Clemson 4 weeks in a row. But assuming that didn't happen, the ACC doesn't really have anything to offer like what he's seen. But also, look, he's in a new place with a new offense. And, I always go back to, and I say this about junior college kids, I say this about a lot of things, but there are always reasons people transfer, right? I mean, great players who are great where they're at and happy where they're at and everything is going well, those guys don't leave. There's always a reason that players transfer. And sometimes transfers work out great. And sometimes it's like a Drew Smith situation. Hey, I just want to play at a higher level. But when a guy's transferring from a Power 5 school, and I'm not saying Hazelton's a bad kid. I don't think I've ever spoken to him, or not in person, so I can't say he's a bad kid or there's anything going on behind the scenes. I don't want to imply that. Just there are always reasons, man, and maybe we're seeing a reason. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'd certainly never watched Hazelton at Virginia Tech, so I don't know if he was better. His stats suggest he was. I mean, a few things. One, he came into a system where he was learning a new offense. Two, he apparently didn't really practice at camp at all. And three, maybe if he catches the balls that hit his hands this year, his stat line looks pretty different. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, has he been the guy that the Missouri staff hoped when they went out and got a grad transfer receiver? No, but when you're relying on 2 grad transfer receivers, I mean, that's just your position group's probably just, not exactly where it needs to be. And that's probably why you had to have a coaching change.
Yeah. I mean, the receiving position we knew was an issue. And look, they're still 2-3 and in good shape, despite all these things we're talking about. And, I thought Drinkwitz made an interesting point. He said, not all these throws have been perfect. I feel like, and look, some of them have been. Like, some of them have been dropped and just perfect throws that were right in guys' hands. But I feel like we're kind of at this point where we're not allowed to say anything other than Connor Bazelak is amazing, right? And he's been good. Don't get me wrong. He's been very good. But he also was fairly average at Florida. I mean, he wasn't terrible. And considering he didn't have much time to throw and guys were dropping passes and all that, I'm not saying he was awful or was more to blame than anybody else. But there are things he can do better as well. It's not this, they don't have Patrick Mahomes with no receivers here. I mean, he's got things he can do better as well.
Right. I mean, it's like, all sports discussions where we struggle to have nuance. Like, you can be really excited about Connor Bazelak as the quarterback of Missouri while also acknowledging he's a redshirt freshman and got a little bit probably overwhelmed in Florida. I mean, that's an experienced defense, an athletic defense, and Todd Grantham is a good defensive coordinator. I mean, he's had, some issues, but he knows how to confuse opposing quarterbacks. And I just thought Bazelak, he didn't as confident, as crisp as he had in those past 2 games where he really seemed like he knew where he wanted to go with the ball and was on time and accurate. And I think part of that also, the offensive line was in tatters. I mean, he was getting roughed up. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those, like, I mean, you go back and look at the stats. I mean, no part of the offense well against Florida. So certainly, no one was really immune from the blame. I think that the offensive line was probably the biggest issue, but certainly Connor Bazelak could have played well. The coaches could have called probably better plays. I mean, it goes all around, and that's what Drinkwitz said.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Missouri had to play an A game to win there, and I don't know. I think I agreed with you. You gave him like a C-. That was about a C- performance. I think that's fair. Finished strong, says the offensive line was wore out and depleted against Florida. No question. And look, I remember, Mitch, I think. What was your first season working for us? Was it 2018, 2017? 2018.
Yeah, 2018, Drew Lock's senior season.
So I remember Drew Lock's freshman season, right? He lit up South Carolina. Game 1 looked amazing. Game 2 was Florida. And, I mean, Drew said since then, like, that woke me up. I was taking hits I'd never hit. I was seeing things I'd never seen. I was playing against athletes I'd never played against. And Connor Bazelak might have had a little bit of that happen too. Like, LSU's defense didn't really do anything to bother him. Kentucky, I didn't either, if we're being honest. I mean, he handed the ball off 80 times and played really well in those 2 games. And again, I'm not knocking the kid, but Saturday was a little different. Andy had no help, so plenty of that. Got more questions. We're going to get to them in just a second, but I want to remind you guys this show is brought to you by 573Tees. Go to 573tees.com. If you go through Power Mizzou, you can get 10% off of your first order. A lot of good stuff there. I got a good Super Bowl shirt last week. They got I don't think they make Super Bowl shirts for Mitchell's team yet, but maybe down the road, maybe you can get one. And they got Columbia stuff, Royal stuff, Cardinal stuff, all kinds of T-shirts and stuff that you can get from there. So please help them out. Help out everybody who makes what we're doing this year possible. and when you have that option. So let's jump back to some of the previous questions. Matt Anderson's asking about the basketball team. And before we get into this question, it's really interesting to me that Missouri's had a couple definitely disappointing years. And this is not just this. I mean, we're in the middle of football season, right? And there is close to as much interest in Missouri basketball, I think, as there is in Missouri football. And the Missouri football interest is pretty high, but it just goes to, like, people who grew up when I grew up, or who went to school when I went to school. And Mitchell, I've got to imagine your dad would say the same thing when he went to Missouri. I mean, this was a basketball school. This was a basketball fan base. And so I think there's still a lot of people that are somewhere between, I don't know, let's say like 37, 38, 5 years younger than me, up to like your dad's age, probably early 50s, who that is still the main thing, the main sport when they look at Missouri. So I just continue to be amazed, despite what Missouri fans have been drugged through the last 6 years in basketball with a brief respite in 2017, that there still is as much interest in the program as there is.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, to a degree.
They don't actually go to the arena, but they're still interested in the program.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, so there's fans who care and will still follow the team, but they're hurting for bodies in the arena, although that won't show up as much this season because of the coronavirus and the limited crowds and stuff. But I mean, we always have interest about our basketball threads on the message board.
So Matt's asking, if you had to pick, do they make or miss the NCAA tournament this year? Man, I don't know where I fall on this, because I looked at last year, and when they went into the 2019-2020 season, I thought, okay, upside is like a 9 seed, something like that. Downside is sub 500. Well, last year went, like, everything kind of went as poorly as it could have gone, pretty much, I think. There were guys banged up. Jeremiah Tillman couldn't stay on the floor. Nobody could make shots. They still turned the ball over, all that. So I don't know. I view the upside a little bigger this year. I think the advantage they have is this is a year where experience and guys that have played together, I think, is more important. I mean, that's always the way for Missouri, right? When you're not getting one and dones, you need third and fourth year players. So that's always going to be true of Missouri. But I think it's more true this year, just with all the crazy offseason and everything, how much practices were limited and all that. I think experience should play, and experience together should play a bigger role. That said, just talent-wise, this team isn't better than it was last year. Like, it's the same guys.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I could go either way, right? So on one hand, it's not that hard to make, assuming the NCAA tournament is normal. Like,
it means you're a 500 team.
Exactly. You don't have to do anything crazy. You basically, if you go 9-9 in conference, you beat one or two, like, I don't know, top 15, top 20 teams, which Missouri even did that last year, getting Auburn at home. Yeah. And you maybe win a game in the conference tournament. Like, I really think, like, that's about all it takes, especially, like, I don't know. I don't think the non-conference schedule is going to end up being super hard, because I think most of the, Power 5 teams they would have played aren't going to be there. So you just kind of avoid messing up there, and then, go something around 500 in conference play. That said, there's still too many things, I think, for me that I have to see them do before I can quite say, pick with confidence that they'll do it. I need to see them not, have this rough patch in non-conference play or early in conference play that basically takes them out of it. And injuries have been a part of that for sure, losing good players early in the season, but I need to see them make shots. That's an easy thing to say. Yeah, well, if they just make shots, well, if that's for every team,
right.
If every
it's
team
like
just made more
in
shots,
football, if you're just good at offense and defense, you're going to be good.
Exactly. So I would not be surprised by any means if they make the tournament. And I do think, like you said, that experience helps. But yeah, I don't think this team necessarily like went out and got a lot better in the offseason. You're banking on them staying healthy and players progressing, which, as we've seen over the last few years, just isn't something you can count on.
Yeah, and I've always, like you're talking about the difficulty of making the NCAA tournament, I equate it approximately to making the Liberty Bowl. Like nobody should apologize for it. It's good. People care about it, but it's as a Power 5 team, it's not impossible, right? I mean, I think at Missouri, the goal should be 3 tournaments every 4 years. Maybe that's a little high, but I think that should be the goal. 3 tournaments every 4 years and have one team in those 4 capable of actually doing something. Because even in 2017, and again, it was injury. We get it. But even in 2017, 2018, which I think is the only time Missouri's made the tournament in like 7 seasons, I mean, they were a 9 seed. And they weren't now it looks weird because Florida State did actually go on a run that year. And so Missouri fans will say, well, hey, if we'd just beaten Florida State, maybe we make that. That wasn't a team that looked to me like it was really any threat to do anything. So I think there's a difference between, yes, the goal this year is just make the tournament. Especially because next year, who knows? But when you look at it, you say, when's the next time they have a chance to do something in the tournament? And back to what we were talking about the talent, there were 28 4- and 5-star players brought into SEC programs this year, which, by the way, doesn't include transfers. There may have been, all Eric Musselman does is take transfers, so it's probably actually higher than 28. Missouri and South Carolina are the only schools that didn't add one. So while you're banking on your team getting better because they're all back, everybody else is upgrading the talent on the roster. And that is, look, it's a concern. I mean, we don't know the schedule, so we can't pick anything. But, like, if this was just a normal season with the schedule we expected, 32 games, I don't know. I probably would have picked them, 18-14, 19-13, something like that, which puts you in that. Basically what that is, it's a Conzo Martin team. It's you're one of the last 6 teams in or one of the first 6 teams out. It's what he's been almost every year in his entire career until the last 2 he slipped below it.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. And I mean, I don't know. I certainly think if you're below the bubble again this season, that's when alarm bells kind of really start to go off. But they should definitely be in that range. But maybe they could surprise us on the high end. I don't know. It's weird basketball. Like all it takes is like 2 or 3 games make the difference from a bubble team to like a 6 or 7 seed. So we'll see.
So David wants to know: are there any players we need to watch for the upcoming season? I mean, look, truthfully, they're the same guys. I mean, they're really – there's not an impact newcomer, right? I'm not missing anybody that we're thinking he's new to the roster and is going to make a significant difference on this team. Right? Okay, well, Mitchell is frozen on me right now, so we're going to hang up and try to call him back. He has disappeared on me. So I wondered why he seemed so uninterested in what I was saying. But we're going to give him a ring back and see if we can get him on the line. We'll go back to just me on the screen until we manage to get that done. So let's see. If we manage to add Mitchell back in, that would be a big bonus, certainly. Okay, it's ringing, and hey, Mitchell answered the phone, and there he is.
I'm back.
Yeah, what's up, man?
Good. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good. Good to have you back.
Okay, sorry. I don't know what happened there.
Well, I was in the middle of talking, and you were just like staring at me, frozen on the screen, and I thought maybe what I was saying was incredibly boring, but I think your internet just gave up.
Oh, yeah, sorry. But yeah, basically, your question was about, does Missouri have someone on this team or did Missouri bring someone in who will make an impact? Drew Buggs, I think, will play.
Right, I forgot about him.
I think he'll play 20 minutes a game, something like that, maybe more. He's a guy who, he gives them another ball handler, and he helps prevent Drew Smith from wearing down as he kind of did last season. And then there probably are some times when they play him at the same time as Drew Smith and Xavier Pinson. But, I mean, you don't bank on him being like a double-digit scorer, I don't think, by any means. So I think it's more so, I think Xavier Pinson, they really need him to be the player he was for the last, I don't know, 12 games of his career versus the first 45 or whatever it was. And they need Jeremiah Tillman's always the X factor. Like, he's got to stay on the floor. He's got to be. He doesn't have to put up huge numbers, but he's just got to be a presence and help rebound. And he makes their defense a lot better just by being out there. So he's got to stay on the floor.
So you kind of answered what I was going to ask next. Like, pick the guy that takes this team to that next level. And I think it could be Kobe Brown. I think he's the guy that I look to. Like, he was pretty good as a freshman, hit a little bit of a wall, a little bit up and down, but I think he's a guy that if you want to say, hey, who's a guy that raises his level of play and helps this team get to the next level, I think he's a guy maybe we look at this year. Moving on through the comments, Ron Davis wants to know, out of the remaining peer opponents, which team is the toughest on the schedule? Weird things happen when Missouri plays South Carolina, but I think Arkansas will be a pretty stout test. So the last 4 games, and I think I've got the order right here, are South Carolina, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Vandy. Are South Carolina and Mississippi State both road games this year?
Yes. So it's South Carolina, then Arkansas, then Mississippi State, then Vandy.
Okay. So,
yeah.
Look, we can take Vandy out of that conversation. They are not the toughest of those 4.
Big no there.
I think, frankly, we can take, especially with no Kylan Hill, I think we'd take Mississippi State out of that discussion. I would put Mississippi State 13th in SEC power rankings, right?
Oh, yes, but they're pretty far beneath 12th, too.
Yeah, so it really comes down to who do we think is better, South Carolina or Arkansas? South Carolina beat Auburn. Arkansas beat Auburn kind of, but wasn't allowed to beat Auburn. So I don't know. I mean, Arkansas was like, they put up 31 points on A&M. They weren't really ever any threat to win that game, but they didn't get blown out. I don't know what to think. They're clearly much better than they have been, but they're not good. And I don't know where on that spectrum they fall. South Carolina is also, I don't think they're good, but they're not terrible. I think those are pretty similar teams.
Yeah, I think they're pretty similar. I'd probably give the edge to South Carolina. 1, it's a road game, and Missouri's looked pretty terrible at both of its road games so far. 2, I just think I like credit to Arkansas for sure. I just think they've been overachieving a little bit. Their wins, they have like a total of like 12 turnovers across those 2 games. Like, that's not really sustainable. And their 2 wins, while they looked good, especially the Mississippi State one looked good at the time, but it's over the 2 Mississippi schools who are not exactly juggernauts. So right. Neither team is great. I would, Missouri may be favored against both. I think probably will be against Arkansas at home. I don't know about South Carolina on the road. It'll be interesting to see. But I don't think like one is like appreciably tougher than the other, but I'd give the edge to South Carolina.
I think Missouri will be favored over Arkansas, Vanderbilt, and Mississippi State. I think South Carolina will probably be a little bit of a favorite unless things, go south there in the next few weeks. So we talked about this a little at the beginning, but David says, should there have been more suspensions and or ejections after the fight, and Mullen should have been fined more. He's obnoxious. So let's take that in reverse order. I really didn't know until last week that pretty much everyone in the SEC kind of hates Dan Mullen. Like, talking to guys who have covered this league longer than I have and all that, like, I don't think anybody was that surprised. I really didn't know he was that guy. I just thought he was, I don't know, he was the guy that, he was a pretty good offensive coach, and he looked like Cousin Eddie from Christmas Vacation, and I didn't know he was super obnoxious, but he seems to be.
I didn't either. I've been caught off guard by this whole thing. Yeah. First of all, like all I know about most SEC coaches is like their SEC media days persona, and he's actually one of the best. Like, yeah. I enjoy listening to him talk at media days. He's like pretty engaging and not, just filibustering the whole time. But also, like, yeah, he's just kind of been harmless the rest of his career. Like, he was out there in Starkville doing goofy things. I think he is a prodigious buffalo wing eater or something like that. Like, that's all that. So I was surprised. And I don't know. Like, maybe by the time we got to Saturday, a little less surprised. He had been on a little bit of a roll of saying ill-advised things in public. But yes, I was a little bit surprised as well.
Yeah, I had no idea, to be quite honest, but now I know. So
going back to answer the question, I mean, like, first of all, I don't know. Yes, you can argue maybe he should have been fined more, but like you kind of said earlier, like, if I'm a Missouri fan, there was a lot of outrage about this. Like, why do you really care? Like, how much he gets fined doesn't impact
Right.
your team whatsoever. And should there have been more suspensions and ejections? Maybe. I'm surprised a few more Florida players didn't get dinged for throwing punches. I'm surprised more players didn't get thrown out during the game, if we're being honest. But, I don't know. I mean, two of Missouri's 3 half-game suspensions are pretty meaningful, as we touched on earlier. So
well, and I think at some point the SEC has to look at, I don't know, man. We can't suspend everybody on these 2 teams and just send Georgia to Atlanta on its own. I mean,
true.
Because the biggest beneficiary of this, let's be honest, is Georgia. Now, I don't know.
Huge.
I don't know a ton about the guys that got suspended for Florida because I don't really care about Florida's roster. But so I don't know if they're starters or major impact players or whatever. But they're not playing, and so clearly they're at least slightly worse team than they would have been at full strength playing Georgia. And then Missouri is also worse than it was going to be playing Georgia. And no, nobody expects Missouri to beat Georgia, but their chances are worse after the suspensions than they were before. So if you start just tossing out like 10 dudes from Florida, you're basically saying, yeah, Georgia, just go play in the SEC title game. And I don't know, maybe that's fair, but I don't know. Again, at least that fight gave us something to talk about out of that game, because the rest of that game was dreadful.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, like we have to, you have to be like, yeah, you hate to see that. It was an ugly thing. And it was. Like, it's not good. And it was a bad look for Missouri at the time, because that was just a terrible end to a terrible few minutes stretch. But also, I was pretty glad for it, because I don't know what else I would have written about after that game.
Right, 100%. Like, it gave us something to talk about. So, all right, so Jake is back, wants to know, what did you think about Drinkwitz's Tommy Tuberville comments today? Made me laugh. Yeah, it was just funny. I mean, it was just funny. Like
it was pretty funny. So for people who don't know, he was asked a question in his press conference today about Tommy Tuberville, which it's Tuberville. Yeah. So that's the start.
I am calling him Coach Tubes from now on.
Yeah, he said, "Who's Tuberville?" The reporter thought he actually didn't know, and it was just kind of a whole scene. His answer after that, I don't even remember what he said. Actually, I truly don't remember how he answered the question about being a politician. It was just funny to hear him ask about Tuberville.
He basically said, "No, I don't want to. I have enough problems being a football coach. I don't need to run for a public office." I actually think he'd be a pretty decent politician. Like,
he said,
I don't know as far as the actual like policy making and stuff. Look, I don't know anything about that, but just as far as like entertaining and doing the press part of the job, I think he'd be a good politician.
He's absolutely said he thought about being a politician when he went to he was originally going to pre-law at wherever he went to school, Arkansas Tech or whatever, with the goal of being a politician.
There you go.
Yeah, he definitely has the personality for it.
Yeah. So David again brings up a good point. At least we didn't have to go to Gainesville to cover the game. Worst trip in the SEC. Look, I don't know. I've never been to Starkville, but Gainesville is the worst trip I've made in the SEC. Back to hoops. Michael Martin wants to know, do you anticipate Drew Smith, Pinson, and Drew Buggs ever being on the floor at the same time? The 3 spot has been an issue for us the last few years. I think that's actually going to be a pretty common lineup for Missouri. I think that could be the starting 1, 2, and 3 for Missouri, actually.
It could be. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, Konzo Martin said when last we talked to him, they've been on the floor at the same time some, and they will be this season. So yeah, you'll see it. I'm not sure. I'm not sold. They might all 3 be announced as the starters. I'm not sold on if they'll. I mean, that's a pretty small 1, 2, and 3. I could be wrong, but I think Buggs is like 6'3". Now, teams do play small now. But you're basically, you're putting 3 point guards on the floor at the same time. That has its perks and it has its drawbacks. I know Konzo Martin loves defense enough that if he's got a 3 on the other team who's 6'7" and who's abusing, Drew Smith or Drew Buggs there, it's not going to last, even if that's, helping on the offensive end. So, I don't know. We'll see. I would not, you will see it. I don't know if it'll be like a majority of the time lineup.
Yeah. So, I think we're all caught up. I appreciate with the different night and all that. I understand it was going to be a little bit maybe not quite as well attended as some of our other shows, but appreciate those of you who were here joining in and asking questions and comments and all that. And also, again, I know there's a lot of stuff going on. Everybody's been kind of preoccupied the last 2 or 3 days. So thanks for taking 45 minutes to come hang out with us and talk Mizzou football. So we'll just kind of wrap this up. Maybe running through the SEC schedule, Missouri doesn't play, obviously, this week. There are, I don't know, I think 4 games in the league, 4 or 5 games. I can't remember. I'm going to watch our ticker scroll across here, and we're just kind of run through them. But the big one is, the first one is Georgia and Florida, the cocktail party. I don't know, man. What do you think about this one?
I'm torn. I kind of think Florida's the better team. I don't want to overreact to 1 week, certainly. Missouri just didn't play very well this past week, but Florida definitely has the better quarterback, which is really important, as we saw in the Georgia-Alabama game. They've got, playmakers that aren't quite Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, but I mean, Kadarius Toney and Kyle Pitts are good enough, I think, to move the ball and have some favorable matchups against anyone. And their defense, if they played the way they did against Missouri, is good enough. I mean, because Georgia's just not going to go out there and sling the ball around and score 30 points. That said, I still need to see – I still feel like I said the same thing before the Georgia-Alabama game, and it sort of came true. Like, I just need to see Florida actually break through and win it without – it seems like they've just kind of self-destructed in this game a few times. At least last year, I remember they gave up a bunch of, 3rd and longs. So I picked Georgia in our picks that ran this morning. I'll stick with it, but with no conviction.
Yeah, I think I picked Florida in our picks, and I don't know if I believe it, but if Kyle Trask played for Georgia – I would actually maybe pick Georgia to win the national title. I think they're that good at every other spot. But Stetson Bennett has 4 picks and no touchdowns in the last 6 quarters. And, man, Kirby Smart, he needs this game because eventually it happened to Mark, and it's not going to happen to Kirby yet. But eventually people get tired of being just consistently on one level. That's why Mark Richt got fired at Georgia. He consistently won 9-10 games, but people got tired of that. So at some point, and it won't happen for a few years, but people will get a little tired of, you go 11-1 or 12-1, but you can't win the one, And I think what's really hurting Kirby is he just digs in every week. Stetson Bennett gives us the best chance to win. I don't know. JT Daniels must be terrible then. I mean, he must be a complete bust.
Or still hurt, maybe.
Right,
I don't know.
Or still hurt. But this also comes on the heels of everybody has to think back a year. This comes on the heels of Justin Fields transferring to Ohio State because Kirby wouldn't play him over Jake Fromm. And there's really no question at this point who the better quarterback is, right? Maybe Georgia doesn't go to the national title game 2 years ago if Fields plays more, but I bet they win one either last year or this year if he's there.
Yeah, it's tough because, probably at that time, at the preseason, I guess, 2 seasons ago or whatever, when Fields left or was upset, I could see the case at that time Fromm gave them the better chance because he'd been around for, a year. He'd built chemistry with everyone. He'd done it.
But not long
term. But exactly. So it's a hard balancing act. But yeah, I mean, yes, that absolutely hurts Kirby's perception among Georgia fans. I remember I was down there for the Mizzou Georgia game last year. My brother goes to Georgia, and I was hanging out with him and some of his friends. And I mean, the Ohio State game would come on, and Justin Fields' touchdown would go out, and they were just irate every time he got mentioned. Just I can't believe we let him go. And Kirby, if they say let him go, I don't think he just let him go.
Right. I'm sure Kirby would have liked to keep him.
But that absolutely raises the pressure, especially now when you are a quarterback away from, maybe being, the best team in the SEC.
So at 2:30 on Saturday, there is one of the best games of the SEC season opposite one of the worst. I mean, do you have any words about Vanderbilt and Mississippi State playing a football game?
No, I don't. I will not watch. I hope no one should watch. That's all. Those are my words. No one should watch.
Yeah, I hope Georgia and Florida is close because I'm not flipping over to Vandy, Mississippi State. A&M, South Carolina. This is the traditional crossover rivalry. We could probably spend an entire 42 seconds running through the great moments in Texas A&M, South Carolina history. I don't know. I mean, A&M's playing pretty well. They're clearly better. They're oddly probably the SEC team with the best chance to make the playoff other than Alabama, which is kind of stupid but true.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I refuse to believe A&M is really all that good. I don't think they're top 10 good.
I don't know.
But they're good enough to beat South Carolina, I think. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I don't know if they win. Maybe, yeah. We've seen it before. The West team with one loss gets a spot in the playoff if Alabama goes undefeated. So maybe, especially this year. But man, that would be a little bit disappointing.
Yeah. So the last one is actually I'm interested in watching this game. Tennessee, Arkansas. I'm intrigued with this one. You know, I think that like Tennessee, boy, they gotta win. They can't lose this game. Like, I honestly think if they lose this game, we start talking about if Jeremy Pruitt gets to come back next year.
Yeah, especially, I mean, with their fan base, they might have already had these conversations after they just extended him. But yeah, I mean, yeah, they got to win this one. They built up that win streak on beating the teams they should. Then they ran into a more talented team in Georgia, and then they let it kind of spiral into the next week, and they looked like they had quarterback issues against Kentucky. And that was really the big one, was the Kentucky loss to the Alabama one. Again, not a huge deal, but you can't lose 4 games in a row, and yeah, and especially have them look as bad as the last couple have.
And I think this game and the Missouri game are really Arkansas's chance to prove, like, hey, we're not just better than we have been. We're actually, like, on the road to being decent. Because those are 2 games. If you can get 1 or 2 of those, 3-7, 4-6, like, obviously much better than 0 and whatever you were, the 0 and 3 years. But the rest of the schedule has. They haven't played Alabama yet, I don't think. They've got basically a lot of they haven't played LSU yet, and LSU's not great, but still, that's tough. So they've got, and they still have to play Florida this year, I think.
I think you're right.
I think even though they're better than they have been, there aren't a lot of chances for wins left for Arkansas, and this is one where I think this is kind of the difference between. Yeah, it's a nice little story that fizzled out, and hey, maybe Sam Pittman actually is really taking steps much faster than we thought.
Yeah, for sure. Now, that fan base should and will feel good about what Sam Pittman and his staff has accomplished this year, no matter if they lose out. I mean, They should. I fully expected them to lose all 10 games this season,
and I didn't think any would be close.
No, I didn't either. I mean, their schedule was impossible. They already played and beat probably the 2 worst teams on it. But yeah, you're 100% right. Yeah, this game, the Tennessee game, especially with how Tennessee's been playing, and Missouri are their 2 chances to get a 3rd win and show that it's not just kind of a little fluke.
Yeah, so that's where we're at in the SEC. Missouri off this week. Georgia 11 a.m. kickoff, right?
That is correct. On November 14th, 11 a.m. at Forde Field. I'll be there.
All right, so I'll be there. Mitch will be there. I'll be here. We will be here. We're going back to Wednesday nights next week for this show. I promise to have all the technology working. We know what we're doing now. We tried to do something new. It didn't work. It broke everything, so forget anything new. We promise not to try that anymore. Before you guys leave, hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed. Share the show. Share the channel. All that. Get the word out, and check out 573tees.com. Go buy yourself a new shirt. We will let you guys get back to watching, true crime documentaries or whatever you might have been watching for the last 72 hours before spending some time with us. So thanks, and we'll see you next week.